My name is Hades. I am believed to be the source of fear, the unseen one, the giver of nightmares, the attacker of poor innocent Persephone. No one ever gives me a chance to tell my version of the tale, how Persephone truly cared about me and was mistreated by her mother, as well as how I never stole her away. Here's my one chance to show you my side and prove you mortals wrong. My day began like most days. I awoke with the Fury screaming at me with a list of tasks to attend to. I read the list, expecting the usual feed Cerberus, and talk to the Shades about forgetting the past, etc. However, I had something unusual this day. Visit the upper world to talk to Zeus. Zeus never wants to talk to me. In fact, he sent me to the underworld because he couldn't stand me. He chose that place because it was the farthest away from everything and extremely depressing. I tried to make the most out of it. I turned the place into a suburbia. Tartarus, where the bad souls go, is the poorest part. Asphodel is middle class, and Elysium is the underworld's equivalent to Beverly Hills. I tried to give my palace, which is in the heart of Elysium, a Victorian theme. It is black and red and has elegant spires and glittering jewels. A river, Styx, runs right through the front doors. The ferryman, Charon, stops there every morning and night, delivering shades to me and my subjects. On this specific day, I rode the ferry to the upper world. Along the way, Charon bought me coffee. "You know," he said as he sipped, "Zeus has a daughter." I stirred my coffee with my spoon. "He has many daughters. And you, my friend, have none. You should change that." I froze. "You want me to get married?" "Of course. You could use more help with the jobs in the underworld." "You're crazy." "Possibly," he replied, "but you seem very lonely. You could use a woman." "I don't like talking about the opposite gender like that. I want to find a compatible partner who loves me for who I am." "Love is dead, Hades," Charon said, putting down his coffee cup. "You, of all people, should know that." Thus ended our conversation. I peered over the edge of the ferry and saw my reflection in the water. A tall, pale bachelor with thick black hair peered up at me. His eyes were silver and looked very perplexed. A few strands of hair fell over his eyes. He smiled a thin-lipped, bitter grin, showing white, polished teeth. "Are you checking yourself out in the reflection?" Charon asked. "No," I lied, pulling myself up and viewing the outside world. We had exited the underworld. The sun was blindingly bright. At my home, we have an artificial sun to give everything a daylight glow, but not to the point where it hurt our eyes. I got off of the ferry, bid my goodbyes, and tried to figure out where Zeus would be. "Are you lost?" a feminine voice asked me. I looked around. Who said that? I felt a tapping at my hips, so I looked down. A girl dressed in knee-high leather boots, a floral skirt, and a black shirt was looking up at me. She had white blonde curls and the eyes the color of ebony. The contrast was both beautiful and haunting. "I did," she said, smirking. Her lips looked thick, red, and luscious, like that of mortal's blood. She was cute and seductive at the same time. She was Persephone, the daughter of Zeus and Demeter, goddess of harvest. She was definitely one of my most favorite people on Olympus. "Why, hello there," I said with surprise. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Are you here for business?" she asked. "Yes, actually. Do you know where Zeus is?" She frowned. "I believe he's at his palace. I'll walk you there." As we walked, she chatted away about her favorite flowers, black roses and narcissus, and how her mother treated her. "She wants me to remain eternally abstinent," she informed me, "so I'll never get married or have kids or anything. I'll end up just like Artemis." She sniffed. "Maybe I can change that," I said impulsively. She looked at me, her dark eyes wide. Then she smiled a playful smile. "We'll see what my father says about that." "What do you think?" I asked. "I'd rather live in the underworld itself than in paradise with my mother." She slipped her pale hand in mine. "Plus, I definitely have feelings for you." We had arrived at the palace. It was dark blue, with huge, dramatic columns and double doors with lightning bolts. "I'll wait for you," she whispered. I put her head in my hands, making her look at me. "Don't wait for me. If he agrees that I can marry you, then I'll send you a sign." "A sign?" she asked, her voice high and sweet. "A narcissus." She grinned, stood on tiptoe, and kissed me. I blushed and patted her hair and bid farewell. I walked into the throne room, my footsteps echoing. I approached Zeus's throne, which was occupied by him, and bowed. "My lord," I said. "Hades?" He nodded. "Get up." I stood. "I called you here to discuss a marriage." "But You should be finding a suitable woman by now. Is there any that suit your fancy?" "Persephone!" I blurted out. "I want Persephone. I actually meant to bring this up as soon as I got here." "Great minds think alike." He froze. Well, maybe this doesn't apply here. Your mind is definitely not as great as mine. I groaned. Zeus is arrogant sometimes. Well, this will be interesting, he continued, since her mother refuses marriage between her daughter and a man. However, I agree that you two will be a suitable couple. Perhaps you could elope without Demeter knowing? I like the idea, but what about her wrath? Don't worry about it, he smiled. She's nowhere near as bad as my wife. Now go on and prepare for your wedding. I left with a light bounce in my step. I met Charon at the edge of the Styx. You seem happy today. Did the meeting go well? I'm getting married, I said, trying to mask my enthusiasm. Wow, he said. That's sudden. To whom? Persephone, I replied, caressing her name with my words. Charon fell silent. She's beautiful, but her mother... There was no need to finish the sentence. I knew what he was thinking. The next morning I discovered that the topic of my marriage was much discussed among both my court and the Shades. As soon as I exited my mansion, everyone was saying, "Did you hear that we will have a new queen?" I was excited myself. Almost immediately I sent Persephone a sign. I paced the floors of my mansion, waiting to see if Charon will bring my bride back to me. Soon I could take it no longer, and I drove up to her house. I had a rather nice car. It was a black hearse, of course, but it had all-wheel drive and an HD radio. I arrived at her house, hoping to the gods that her mother wouldn't be around. Persephone came running, holding both the hem of her skirt and a narcissus. She got the message. I opened the door to the passenger side, got in, and kissed me. "I accept," she whispered. We drove down to the underworld in rapid speed. A few days later, we had a ceremony in the courtyard of my mansion. She wore a black lace dress, with a black veil and her white hair pinned atop her head. She looked like she was going to a funeral, which was the tradition of the underworld. In contrast, I wore a white suit with a black tie. My maids had fussed over my hair and insisted that I spiked it with gel, but I refused, so it lay flat on my head with some clumps falling over my eyes as usual. Thanatos, god of death, held the ceremony. It may seem odd, but he held a lot of the weddings in the underworld. Just like the bride was wearing a black dress, it was tradition. He made a quick speech because he was, well, deathly boring, to put it kindly. We said our vows. I promised to be true to my husband or wife as long as the reign of Olympus lasts. Kissed, and broke off to our bedroom. The next morning, Persephone woke me up by smacking my shoulder. I sat up, yelled, "Ow!" and looked at her. "What?" "She's here. I saw her outside my window. Gods, I'm so scared." "Your mother?" "Yes, Hades, she's looking for me." "Get dressed. We'll talk to her." Persephone protested, but eventually gave in. She wore a sleeveless red gown that skimmed the floor, and let her curly white hair loose. I held her hand, and we walked outside. "What were you thinking?" Demeter shouted immediately, approaching me. Demeter was a stout woman who desperately tried to hide her curves with oversized shirts, which did her no justice. At the moment, she was wearing her straw-colored hat in a tight bun, a floral shirt, jeans, tennis shoes, and a frown. "You tear up my garden with your hearse, steal my daughter, and marry her? Everyone knows I want her to be an eternal maiden." "I don't want to be," Persephone muttered. Demeter raised her hand and smacked her, causing her to scream. "Don't, Mother, not like last time!" I stepped in front of her. "Do not treat my wife this way." "Don't think this is the last of it, Hades. People will suffer until you give her back." She stalked away. Persephone looked at me, eyes wide. "I'm scared," she said, burying her face in my chest. My wife was not a weak woman at all. When she was a small child, she would play with swords and spears, and often did manual labor. She had muscles in her arms and legs that would make any woman envious. However, on the inside, she was very broken from what her mother had put her through. Perhaps it was our resentment towards people of power that had drawn us together. "We'll figure this out, my love. I promise. I'll never let you go." "I believe you." Persephone lived with me for about 6 months. She was a very strong queen, and would never let people outspeak her. She was very into being respected in every aspect. She also loved pomegranates. Our kingdom grew many, which made her extremely happy. During that period of time, an influx of shades drifted into our kingdom. Charon made his once-a-day trip into 6. We were not running out of room in the underworld, but we had to divide and expand it more. Our quiet suburban plan soon turned into a city, with our mansion overlooking it. After those 6 months, Zeus came for a visit. "You two are causing a huge problem on Earth. Demeter's convinced that you abducted her daughter, and she's making all the people starve to death. If you don't send Persephone back, our world will die, meaning that we will die as well." Persephone squeezed my arm. I looked at her. Her dark eyes brightened. "I have an idea," she said to both of us. "What if we split the visitation? I can stay here for 6 months, and with my mother for another 6.